And then you work that piece. And then once you work the piece where you as the therapist are holding the role and they're interacting with you in the observer role, and then you work it the other way, where then the client embodies the observer role, which quite often they're not going to be very, very happy about at all. And then you got to do the same thing with the perpetrator role. Otherwise, when triggered in the future, you will tend to either invite into your life observers or perpetrators, or you will tend to play that role out. This is the big juice. This is...
Or you will turn your partner into it.
Yeah, that's what I mean by the other.
Just recreate it, yeah.
That's right. So you find the people, you recruit the people. Yeah, you bring them into your life, or you get some perfectly neutral person and you train them to do it. That's right. Freud said a lot of things, and I know Freud's like the Bible. He says everything and the opposite of everything, so you can quote him for anything, right? However, this is very nice, so I'm going to quote him anyway on this. And he said, it's really striking how much we attempt to train other people to do what we expect of them, right? In other words, it's striking how strong go back to the pumpkin and the basketball, it's striking how powerful our feed-forward loops are. I see you this way, be this way because I see you this way. And he said, what's even more striking than that is the willingness of people to be trained. Yeah. Because if we don't know what's going on, we aren't interpreting correctly what's going on. We think we're trying to create rapport, or we're kind of saying, is this true or not, or we just believe them, and we're off to the races. And it's a battle of whose trance is stronger. If somebody has a traumatic trance, their trance is probably stronger. Sir?
It seems to me that the perpetrator trance that you touched upon is really edgy and also really powerful.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that one? And
Yeah.
how that might play out in the room?
Yeah. Right. Until you're ready to work with it, it's okay if you just simply have a code that it's not welcome in the room. It's just a place you won't go with your clients. I think that that's completely fine. When you are ready to start working with it, you want to, I think, invite it out from the beginning in little bits and dribbles so that working with it becomes really comfortable. Otherwise, if you wait until it explodes, there's a lot of confusion and a lot more energy, and there's no experience working with it. So you actually have the beginnings of that when you do the no exercises with clients. You're doing a baby version of beginning to work with that right there. Because you're supposed to be in this highly cooperative environment, and you ask them to say something and they say no, right? So their procedural memory has no concept, their event memory has no concept that you're a therapist and you're setting up an exercise, right? Those two memory systems can't differentiate between therapy and not therapy. Right? So it's your left hemisphere and it's your executive capacity that knows you're in therapy. The rest of your brain just thinks you're in a room doing stuff with the person, right? So when you're saying things to the person and having them say no to you, you're the therapist, and they're saying no to you, you're actually creating an environment where it's okay for them to say no, to reject you, to push back at you. So you keep working as you work with this, you're just upping the level of how the client can have negative feelings towards you, one little step at a time, and that's making it safer for them and safer for you. Yeah.
I'm still a little confused on how the client would then eventually take on the perpetrator role themselves.
Oh, wow. Great. Okay. So let's, so what that would look like, let's say you were that freshman in high school, okay? So we'd be working, and we would have probably worked all the other roles first. So this would probably be the last piece that was left. And we'd set up we'd set it up, eye contact, containment, and so on. And then probably have you say things like, I just want to kick you. I just want to kick you. Just, God, it feels so good. I can just feel my shoe going into your side. And just really invites you to go deeper and deeper into it, which will freak a lot of people out, which is why we work on it one step at a time. But that's held in that memory. They saw the look on the people's faces when their feet went into their side. That is stored. And a lot of times we try to make our psyche safe by locking those things out and saying, I'm not going to feel things like that. That is too ugly, it's too mean, there's evil in the world, and I'm not going to let it into my brain. Well, it's already stored there.
Mm-hmm.
So the trick is, how can we crack the door and let it come out a little bit at a time? And then once they're comfortable with that, you open the door a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more until it's flowing and the memory's integrated, and then it's okay. But I give you a little taste of what that looks like at like step 14. Okay, you start with that. You start with that, it's a mess. Not because something terrible would happen, probably because the client would just not get it, they would dissociate, it would just be weird and nothing would happen. Okay? Yeah.
So if I've understood correctly,
I want to slow down for a second.
oh, okay.
That was a good one.
See, he's like, ooh, I like yours.
Ollie,
No.
did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's chillax for a little bit.
I've got a lot of energy in my arms. That was the first check-in. There's that.
You know, in response to Alejandro's comment, I'm thinking of the defense mechanism, identification projection. You know, where the client might be, the way they're acting out perpetrator is to have a partner or person in relation acted out by projecting that kind of shadow, that Jungian shadow part.
That's right.
So I'm sitting here kind of just putting it all together.
That's right.
And wondering if it might be helpful to talk a little bit about some of those defenses with the client so that they can kind of understand that this is a normal process that people go through for safety.
Yeah, so two answers to that. Yes, projective identification. That's exactly right. Bingo. Yeah, I explain a lot of what I'm thinking with my clients. Now, I don't sort of spill everything that comes up. I'm also holding all sorts of things back and editing. But I really think that the work goes much better if the client, I want to create an ally with the client's executive function, with the client's understanding, the client's maps. Because if we're going to go in and set up these really gnarly little experiments, I want us all to be completely as much as alliance as possible when we open this door. Right? So yeah, talk about these things definitely. So I actually have never, no, that's not true. It's very rare that I explain projective identification to a client. I think I've only done that once with a couple, I can still remember it, and we had whiteboards filled. They were a very heady couple and it worked for them. But I had a client, for example, who came in and he had 3 marriages and all 3 ended with him coming home and there was a note on the kitchen table. How do you manage that?
Wow.
Right? So there's something going on. There's a pattern. It's a very, you know, and it was one of these patterns. You know, after a certain kind of an upbringing that we don't need to talk about, he was sent off at 12, boom, to a boarding school, which wasn't a good experience. And it was just this, so things are cool, things are problems, things are all right, things are okay, over. And we ended up working on boarding school is what actually then changed his dynamics with his relationships. Because that's where the pattern was set. That was the great abandonment.
He also may be buying too many sticky notes. Put on the kitchen table.
So do we have a sense of this one? Got a sense of this one with specific events, okay? So this is gnarly. If you're phobic, this scares you. If you're balanced, this scares you. If you're counterphobic, you're drawn to this, in which case you want to take a long time before you work in this territory. Yeah.
It strikes me that this is really a difficult skill set. I mean, I did not learn any of this in my master's program, and I'm curious if most therapists touch this.
Two things. No, transference generally isn't taught. It's not taught for, I think, 3 reasons. The first reason is if you're not talking about traumatic transference, but you're talking about general transference, so like projective identification, but applied to 1,000 different things, it's just wicked complicated. There's a reason why you go into analysis and training, and somewhere between 10 and 20 years later, they say you're ready to see clients. There's a reason for that skill set, right? So that's the first thing. We can begin to look at the problem more because we're only talking about these 4 roles. So that makes it more manageable to actually take it on. The second reason is this is a funny thing, so I'm going to say 2 things. It's very, very difficult to work with, and it's dangerous to work with. But our solution to that has been twofold. The first thing is to create ethics and rules for the field. You don't get to do X, Y, and Z with clients. I don't care if it makes sense. I don't care if it works. Oh, if it seems like the perfect exception to the rule, this time it's different. No, that means you're in a trance. You don't get to, right? So we have those rules, and we threaten to strip people's licenses away or put them in jail if they break them. So I think that's super good. Okay, that's a really, really good response. But the other response is, let's just not talk about it, which is a really naive response, right? And that takes us to the third point, which is it's been technically difficult to teach. So there's a pedagogical problem with teaching transference. So one of the things, for example, in this first part of the training, of you all learning about resourcing and doing this no exercise and doing really basic non-relational containment work, is that can be really frustrating. It's like there are real problems in the world, and you've given us these 3 skill sets, but exactly what I want to work with, which is like childhood trauma or issues, I can only get 2 feet into the room with these tools. Right? And it's because we're giving you the tools one step at a time so that you can actually use them safely and go into this territory so that when you actually start to learn the transference things, you'll be able to be competent in that arena. So the expectation is not that when you take the next training that you're going to be able to go, boom, I can work with all of this stuff. It's going to be, okay, I know where I'm stuck and where I'm fluid with these roles. And I know what I need to do to get more fluid with them, and then I can immediately start to work with these kind of roles with clients, but I need to work on these other ones over time. And you put yourself on a project and you'll be able to do the roles within months. Everybody here should be able to do the roles within months. It's just a matter of putting in the time to practice and make your own fluid, and you can do it. This next piece with these event memories, you may do something like, wow, I've realized that just my next step is really owning that I'm in the savior role and the client's in the victim role, and to really help them to take on those savior attributes while I back off. That could be your next step. Great, do it. And that may take you 2 years to get solid at that and say, okay, I think I'm ready to touch on that observer thing. I need some supervision, I'm kind of scared about that. And you start to take on, it takes a long time.